I talked about the Capitol bill and what's ahead, as well as Senate Bill 83 with Senate Finance Chair Matt Dolan. It's thought that this may be the largest capital budget in state history, and this is from a legislature that prides itself on returning money back to Ohioans and very, very careful spending. How did we get to the largest capital budget in state history here?
Yeah, well, let's make sure we understand what we are saying. The Capitol bill was the vehicle for which a lot of money was spent, but the actual Capitol bill, which is the state's responsibility to fund our state buildings throughout, parks, school buildings, universities, prisons, that is a big part of the capital budget. And because of inflation, because of other cost drivers, and because there's an extraordinary investment in mental health facilities in this budget, the capital budget itself was a little higher than normal, $3.5 billion. Now, included in that $3.5 billion was a pared down community budget. And that is the idea that there are projects within each senator's or rep's district that require bonding, and so we do that through the capital budget. That was down to $150 million, which is significantly less than has been years past. But the big number that is what's driving what I think you're saying is the largest capital budget ever is the $700 million, turned out to be $717 million, that the legislature in their budget, after giving taxpayers $3.1 billion in tax relief, said with this surplus dollars that you do not build ongoing operations on, we're going to give it back through projects that will either be economic development for the regions or improve quality of life. And that's what we also passed yesterday in the bill. So it is a lot of one-time money, which will obviously not be back, and because of the cost drivers of inflation, the buildings that require work throughout the state, it required a little bit more money.
It did get a couple of no votes from Republicans, notably in the Senate. Senator Niraj Antani, who I believe was the only no vote in the Senate, he said the spending was unsustainable. He wanted tax relief to the people who actually own the money, even though that would have been about $65 per Ohioan. So why spend the money the way that you did, that $717 million?
Well, look, Senator Antani can say whatever he wants, but he really hasn't earned my respect as a public servant. So what he said yesterday was all politics. The reality is you don't build ongoing operations, including tax cuts, which take, which have to be paid for, with one-time money. And so we all agreed a few months ago that say the best way to get this money back to taxpayers is through innovative projects. And I think as I worked the bill and talked to people from all over the state, I think what we've seen some large economic projects like the tennis tournament that's going to come to Warren, Ohio, and we've seen some small ones that are just improving theaters in Lake County, Ohio, so that they can provide local community theater. That is what we return to taxpayers. And I think what we have is we have a lot of voices who understood this, who are now going back into their districts saying, look, this was a unique opportunity, take advantage of it, but make sure you're producing, make sure you're driving economic production, or make sure you're improving quality of life.
We are almost to the end of this fiscal year. In fact, it's coming this weekend. The state is required to have a balanced budget, of course. Tax collections are off by $429.4 million, according to OBM's monthly report for May that came out on June 10th. So are you concerned about that at all?
Well, concern is too strong. I think I want to see, we're going to get really into the weeds here, but there is a provision that we put into law a few years ago which allowed pass-through entities to deduct their federal on their state. We also gave them a 2-year look-back period to do that. And so what we're seeing is the refunds on those look-back periods are coming out. If you look at the numbers in terms of refunds, they're high, extraordinarily high. And that's not just from normal income. So I think what we're going to see, if that is in fact the case, a stabilization of the revenues from the income. And I also think what you'll typically see now is an increase in the sales tax as we get closer to the holiday season. We always everyone wants to look at the budget as it passes out of the chamber. But that includes a guesstimate on terms of what Medicaid spending is going to be. We always overestimate, and we did that again. And so that's significantly less spending happening there. And of course, a part of his investments because the interest rates are higher. So collectively, when you see all that, plus the $3.8 billion we have in the rainy day fund, I don't think we're at a level of concern. Because I think we'll see a stabilization and we will maintain a balanced budget all the way through.
Your term is up at the end of the year. There's been a lot of talk about the next capital budget, which you won't presumably be involved in potentially, but specifically about state money for a Cleveland Browns new stadium or a renovated stadium, potentially with a dome. I just want to ask you, do you think the state should be making a significant investment in something like that? And if so, how much?
Well, again, we're going to get in the weeds. So does the state have the responsibility to help out public stadium, sports stadiums? That is a question that you separated. But I don't know that the Browns' offer is being accurately portrayed in the media. They are coming to the state, but what they're actually saying to the state is, look at our plan and look at the return on investment over the next 30 years. And what we're saying is, if the state would give us the full faith and credit and go bond out $600 million, not write a check, but bond out those dollars, the Browns are saying we can show a return where the state actually will benefit from this. And so it's not the legislature or the governor writing them a check. It's an innovative way to use the full faith and credit of the state. And just like any investor, I look at this project and go, is there a likelihood of return? And that's the deep dive that we're doing on their actions, not we're just going to write them a check for $600 million, which is what some legislators are portraying this as, and that's not what the Browns are asking for.
If you do that, though, don't you set a standard that other teams, such as the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Cleveland Guardians, might want to do the same thing? And would that put the state on the hook for that?
First of all, the Guardians don't own their stadium. So seriously, yeah. I mean, you can't suggest that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. The initial question is, should the state be in this business at all? That's a question that should be asked and answered. But what the Browns are saying is, if the state's going to get involved, why not get involved in a transaction that will show a return to the state and does not require a huge upfront chunk of money coming out of the general revenue funds? So it is a partnership. And if that partnership is going to be a win-win, why wouldn't we look at other stadiums? But that's what we first have to determine. Is this, in fact, a win-win situation? And I think as you study it, I think more and more people are going to begin to understand really what's happening and then make a determination is, will the state benefit from this transaction?
Do you think it's a win-win?
Well, I'm doing the deep dive now. I think the concept's a win-win, but like in any investment you take, you're determining, is there a real return? And the risk for the state of Ohio is, if there is not a return, then we, the state of Ohio, taxpayers, are on the hook for the bond of $600 million. So you do not jump into this lightly. But if you can make a determination, just like people do all over the state now when they make an investment, will I see a return? And if the determination is yes, there will be a return, then I think it is a good investment. But we're not there yet.
And finally, should Senate Bill 83 pass? I mean, you voted for it. You've got hundreds of faculty members and students saying it's going to actually quash free speech on campus. It could prevent Ohio from getting some of the best and brightest academics and professors and students. Should Senate Bill 83 pass?
Yeah, well, since Senate 83 has passed the Senate, there has been much more discussion on the bill. And I think it's clear that we want to make sure the university presidents can run their campus in a fiscally responsible way, and also in an environment where everyone gets to feel free to give free speech. irrespective of whatever your positions are. And I think Senate 83 has drawn great attention to that, and I think the universities are engaging. So whether or not as we go forward, do we need to put any of this in statute anymore? I don't know, because as I've talked to university presidents, they have said, look, we are making the changes that we think are important to encourage free speech. We are also asking for, allow us to run the universities a little bit more like a business. And that allows them the flexibility to invest the money in the degrees that the companies and employers want, and maybe de-emphasize the degrees that maybe aren't producing for Ohioans.
So it sounds like you're saying that it might not be needed.
I think that's a discussion that needs to be had before we just run, because clearly there are changes being made in the House, and I am not involved in those negotiations, but I am involved in talking to the university presidents, and I do hear them say, I understand the point that 83 is trying to make. Let's see how we can address it. So, look, sometimes if you draw attention to an issue, you get behavioral change. And I think that's what Senate Bill 83 has done. It has created behavioral change. As we move into a new semester, you know, that this is a time I think we as legislators should reflect and go, okay, what changes have come about in the community, in the universities? You know, and what are people talking about on campus? Is there something more that needs to be done?